It is December 13th, 1577. The air is crisp, the sky heavy with the promise of storms. At Plymouth Harbor, 5 ships stand ready, their sails towering like spectres against the morning mist. On board, a crew of 164 men whispers nervously, their breaths visible in the cold. They know their mission is shrouded in secrecy, whispered only in the corridors of the royal court. At the heart of this fleet is a man whose name will soon echo across the world, Francis Drake, a man of humble beginnings, now entrusted with a mission that could make or break England's place on the global stage. But this is no ordinary voyage. This is a gamble, a provocation to Spain, the greatest naval power of the age. Queen Elizabeth herself has placed her faith and her fortune on this man to strike a blow at her rival's dominance. As the first rays of sunlight pierce the clouds, the anchor chains groan and the fleet begins to move. Unknown to those watching from the shore, these ships are bound not just for the edge of the known world, but for history itself. Will they succeed? Or will this journey become a tale of ambition lost to the merciless seas? Only time will tell. On this day, the legend of Francis Drake begins. Francis Drake was born around 1540 in Tavistock, Devon, a town surrounded by rugged landscapes and a rich maritime tradition. The eldest of 12 children, Drake's upbringing was modest. His father, Edmund Drake, was a farmer turned preacher who fled religious persecution during the Prayer Book Rebellion in 1549. Relocating to Kent, Edmund found work as a chaplain for the Navy, exposing young Francis to the maritime world that would define his life. It was here that the seeds of his fascination with the sea were sown. Drake's career began in the household of William Hawkins, a prominent sea captain and relative. As an apprentice, Drake learned the skills of navigation and trade, sailing between England, France, and the Low Countries. His aptitude for seamanship quickly gained him the trust of his superiors. By his early 20s, Drake had risen to command a small trading vessel bequeathed to him by its owner. This formative period honed his abilities and exposed him to the economic and political power of maritime trade. Drake's early voyages were not without controversy. In the 1560s, he joined his cousin John Hawkins on expeditions that included the transatlantic slave trade. These voyages disrupted the Spanish and Portuguese monopoly on African slaves, bringing captives to Spanish colonies in the Americas. Although highly profitable, they were fraught with danger. One such venture ended in disaster at the Battle of San Juan de Ulua in 1568, where the Spanish ambushed Hawkins's fleet. Drake barely escaped with his life, vowing revenge against Spain. This rivalry with Spain became the driving force of Drake's career. By the 1570s, he had transitioned from a merchant to a privateer, an officially sanctioned pirate, attacking Spanish ships and settlements. His raids along the Spanish Main, the colonial coastline of the Americas, made him infamous. To the Spanish, he was El Drake, the dragon, a name that symbolized terror. Yet, in England, he was celebrated as a hero, bringing wealth and prestige to a nation eager to challenge Spanish dominance. In 1577, Drake caught the attention of Queen Elizabeth I, who saw in him a man capable of advancing England's ambitions. Under the guise of exploration, she secretly tasked him with a mission to disrupt Spanish interests in the Pacific, territory Spain considered its own. The Queen herself invested in the voyage, underscoring its importance. For Drake, this was a chance not only to prove his loyalty to the crown, but also to seek immense personal wealth. Thus, on December 13th, 1577, Francis Drake set sail from Plymouth with 5 ships and 164 men. The expedition was cloaked in secrecy, its true purpose known only to a select few. Officially, it was a voyage of discovery. In reality, it was a calculated strike at the heart of Spanish power. What lay ahead was an odyssey of daring exploits, unimaginable wealth, and moments of sheer survival that would immortalize Drake as one of history's most legendary figures. The fleet that left Plymouth on December 12, 1577, was modest by modern standards, but ambitious for its time. Led by Drake aboard the flagship Pelican, later renamed the Golden Hind, the expedition included 4 other vessels: the Elizabeth Marigold Swan and Christopher. Together they carried 164 men, a mix of seasoned sailors, soldiers, and adventurers lured by the promise of fortune. Supplies included provisions for months at sea, navigational instruments, and weapons, highlighting the dual nature of the voyage as both exploratory and military. The journey began with challenges. After leaving Plymouth, the fleet encountered treacherous weather, forcing them to seek refuge in Falmouth, Cornwall. This setback was an ominous start to the voyage, testing the resolve of both the crew and their leader. But Drake was undeterred. His reputation for boldness and resilience rallied his men, and by December 13th they were back at sea, their course set for the Cape Verde Islands off the coast of Africa. The fleet's first major stop was the Cape Verde Islands, where they resupplied and captured a Portuguese merchant ship, the Mary, off the coast of Africa. This was a strategic move, as the Mary's captain, Nuno da Silva, was an experienced navigator familiar with South American waters. He would prove invaluable in guiding Drake through uncharted territories, even as a reluctant participant in the expedition. Life aboard the ships was grueling. The cramped quarters, harsh weather, and uncertainty of the voyage tested the endurance of the crew. Food supplies were rationed, and water was stored in barrels that often turned foul after weeks at sea. Despite these hardships, Drake maintained strict discipline, ensuring that his men remained focused on the mission. His leadership, both feared and respected, was critical to the fleet's survival during these early stages. By the time the fleet reached the coast of South America, the men were weary but determined. Drake's plan was to navigate through the Strait of Magellan, a perilous route at the southern tip of the continent, into the Pacific Ocean. This was uncharted territory for the English, and the Spanish controlled these waters with an iron grip. For Drake, success here would not only defy Spain, but also open new opportunities for English expansion. The departure from Plymouth marked the beginning of an extraordinary journey, one filled with danger, betrayal, and unimaginable discovery. As the fleet ventured further into the unknown, they carried the hopes of a nation hungry for wealth and glory. But the challenges they had faced so far were only the beginning. Ahead lay storms, mutiny, and encounters that would test their courage to its very limits. After months at sea, Drake's fleet reached the eastern coast of South America, their sights set on the treacherous Strait of Magellan, a narrow passage that promised access to the vast Pacific Ocean. But this was no ordinary route. The strait was infamous for its violent storms, rocky terrain, and unpredictable currents. It was here that the fleet's cohesion and Drake's leadership would be pushed to their limits. The fleet spent weeks battling the harsh conditions of the strait. Two of the smaller ships, the Christopher and the Swan, were deemed unfit for the journey ahead and were scuttled. Supplies were redistributed and morale grew strained. Adding to the challenges was growing tension among the crew, particularly between Drake and Thomas Doughty, one of his co-commanders. Accusations of mutiny and treason would soon come to a head, with grave consequences. In June 1578, as the fleet prepared to enter the Pacific, Drake accused Doughty of plotting against him. A trial was held aboard the Golden Hind, where Drake himself acted as judge, jury, and executioner. Despite Doughty's protests and a lack of substantial evidence, Drake sentenced him to death. In a gesture meant to maintain unity, Drake shared a final meal with Doughty before his execution. On July 2nd, Doughty was beheaded, a stark warning to any who might question Drake's authority. By September 1578, the fleet emerged into the Pacific Ocean. However, their relief was short-lived. Violent storms scattered the ships, sinking the Marigold and forcing the Elizabeth to turn back to England. Only the Golden Hind remained, its crew battered but determined. This marked a critical turning point. Drake was now alone, leading the sole surviving ship on an unprecedented mission into Spanish-controlled waters. As Drake pushed northward, his fleet's mission transformed from exploration to outright conflict. Along the coast of Chile and Peru, Drake attacked Spanish ports and ships, seizing gold, silver, and supplies. His most famous capture was the Spanish galleon Nuestra Señora de la Concepción, nicknamed Cacafuego. Aboard, Drake found an extraordinary treasure haul, 26 tons of silver, gold, and jewels, enough to make the voyage one of the most profitable in history. Drake's action sent shockwaves through the Spanish Empire. To the English, he was a hero, challenging Spain's dominance and enriching the crown. To the Spanish, he was a pirate, a dangerous threat to their colonial interests. As Drake continued his journey, he knew the risks were mounting. Every Spanish port and ship he encountered could spell disaster, yet he pressed on, determined to complete the mission. By the end of 1578, Francis Drake had entered the Pacific alone but unyielding. The challenges he faced had already claimed much of his fleet, yet his ambition burned brighter than ever. Ahead lay further riches, encounters with new worlds, and the ultimate test of his leadership and endurance. For Drake, the voyage was no longer just about survival, it was about making history. By early 1579, Francis Drake and his crew were venturing into uncharted waters. With the Golden Hind as their only remaining ship, they sailed northward along the Pacific coast of the Americas, beyond the limits of Spanish knowledge. Drake's determination to chart new territories and evade Spanish retaliation pushed the boundaries of exploration, yet his journey was also driven by the pursuit of treasure and the interests of Queen Elizabeth I. Drake's most notable landfall on this leg of the voyage was in what is now Northern California. In June 1579, he claimed the territory for England, naming it Nova Albion, or New England. While there, Drake and his crew repaired the Golden Hind, interacted peacefully with the local Miwok people, and prepared for the next stage of their journey. This claim was significant, as it marked England's first foothold on the Pacific coast, even if it would not be realized for centuries. From California, Drake made the bold decision to cross the Pacific Ocean. This journey was fraught with challenges. Storms battered the ship, food supplies dwindled, and disease ravaged the crew. Yet, after months of hardship, the Golden Hind reached the Moluccas in modern-day Indonesia. Here, Drake secured vital supplies and forged alliances with local rulers, ensuring his crew's survival and the expedition's continuation. The final leg of the voyage took the Golden Hind through the Indian Ocean and around the Cape of Good Hope. By this point, the ship was laden with treasures from Spanish galleons, including gold, silver, spices, and jewels. Despite the immense value of their cargo, the voyage home was perilous. Storms and the ever-present threat of Spanish interception loomed over the crew. Yet, against all odds, Drake and his men sailed into Plymouth Harbor on September 26, 1580. Drake's return was met with jubilation. He was hailed as a national hero, the first Englishman to circumnavigate the globe. Queen Elizabeth herself visited the Golden Hind and knighted Drake aboard the ship in 1581. The expedition's treasure enriched the English crown and bolstered the nation's ambitions to challenge Spain's dominance on the seas. Drake's journey was more than a feat of navigation. It was a political and economic victory for England. The circumnavigation solidified Francis Drake's place in history. To England, he was a symbol of courage and enterprise. To Spain, he was a pirate and a threat. But beyond these perspectives, Drake's voyage was a turning point. a moment when England's maritime ambitions began to take shape, setting the stage for centuries of exploration and imperial expansion. Drake's circumnavigation was not just a journey around the world, it was a declaration of England's intent to claim its place among the great naval powers of history. The legacy of this voyage continues to inspire, a testament to the daring spirit of exploration that defined the Elizabethan age. The voyage that began on this day in 1577 reshaped the course of history, proving England's naval potential and challenging Spanish supremacy. Sir Francis Drake's daring would inspire generations of explorers and naval commanders. If you like the story about Sir Francis Drake, you are kindly invited to check our other videos about the Middle Ages, and do not forget to like and subscribe. Join us again tomorrow with a new story from the Middle Ages.